Welcome to episode 56 of the AMT podcast. Today I want to talk about value and why it's the most important consideration if you want to be profitable in the long term. Value determines whether or not you enter a trade. Let's assume you use fixed staking and you back short price favorites at 1.05 every time. You could have a 99% win rate and still be at a loss. So being right more often than you're wrong doesn't necessarily translate to profitability. Any tipster can have a good strike rate, but if we're playing the money game, then strike rate means far less than being right at the right price, which is why you need to be able to identify value. If you understand value and have a strong methodology for identifying it, then you can be correct less than 50% of the time, providing your winning trades or your winning bets are more profitable than your losing ones. Value at its core just means that you believe the chance of an event happening is more likely than the odds on offer. You can literally put the price on the event of any outcome occurring. You can make up your entirely own market and just ask a bookmaker to price it up for you. So this begs the question, how do you go about determining value? I can only speak for myself, and as someone who's profitable on several sports, I'll give you some insight as to how I do that. So if we take a sport like horse racing, for example, if I'm trading pre-race where I'm looking to lock in a profit before the race has even started, or cold trading, I'm relying almost strictly on chart reading and technical analysis. So I'm just looking for support and resistance points and just looking for overreactions or corrections. I'm not necessarily trying to price up a horse with a winner in mind. I'm just looking to see whether momentum is gaining or running out just by following the price action. So if a horse has been backed in aggressively from evens down to 1.5, close to the off, if the price has bottomed out and it's trading right at the bottom of its range, then there's really no value left for me to make a back to lay unless I have an angle to let it run in play. Or if I'm looking at a closely contested handicap race where the second favorite's price is getting backed in aggressively, then I'll look to lay the favorite in an anticipation of a likely drift in price, since prices have to readjust to maintain equilibrium. So with cold trading, value is only determined by how other prices are behaving, and we use a combination of technical analysis and information to anticipate those moves beforehand. Now for in-play betting, the methodology is very different. So I like to use the past as a reference. So for example, if a horse has ran well off a certain weight at a certain course and distance and has not been given any additional weight by the handicapper on the day of racing at a similar course at a similar distance, then I would shortlist that horse as a potential back to lay trade. Now given my in-play knowledge at certain tracks, if I know that a horse should jump well at a certain segment of the track if it's going to feature in the finish and it hasn't, then I would look to lay that horse as soon as possible. Or if you look at a sport like cricket and the first innings is just finished, I want to know how many times the score that's been set has been chased on that pitch in similar conditions. The price on offer would therefore have to be weighed up against the likelihood of it happening, which further depends on things like batting conditions, and the team lineup in order to make that decision. If there's bad weather on the radar, say a week before a test match and the pitch is known to have poor drainage, then I'm going to look to back the draw as soon as the prices go live, since the likelihood of getting 4 complete innings diminishes. Now as for boxing, which by the way is one of my favorite sports to bet on, the odds are prone to overreactions due to extraordinary public interest and casuals who tend to overbet on their favorite fighters. I'm therefore very keen to bet against short-priced favorites when they face unpopular or overlooked opposition whose skills and resumes haven't properly been considered. The weight class and manner of victories and defeats also plays a huge part in my decision-making process, since these often tell a far better picture than just a face value look at someone's resume. So take the Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk fight that happened earlier this year. Now I did a preview on the fight. You can watch it here on this channel. And I claim that, according to my methodology, Alexander Usyk should have been the favorite. So, the bookies had it the other way around. Tyson Fury was actually the favorite. And in my opinion, the reason for that was because the media tended to overemphasize the height and weight discrepancy between Fury and Usyk. And the general consensus was that a good big fighter beats a good little fighter, which is a really lazy, a broad comment, because Usyk is not just a good fighter, he's outstanding, if not one of the best ever. And for the sake of not repeating what I said in the preview, and having bet for long enough, I've seen upsets all the time, which are only upsets to the media, not so much according to me based on my methodology. Hype often moves the price a lot in a sport like boxing. And the big motivation for talking about value today was in light of yesterday's circus, the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight. And Mike Tyson was as short as, I think, around 3.1 to win at one point. And the average casual must have thought they hit the jackpot. Mike Tyson, an underdog against a YouTuber, stick the house on it. And it's this sort of lazy methodology or arrogance that you can rely on from the casual punter. And when there's enough of them, they move the line in the wrong direction. Anyone who's been in the ring, or at least watched boxing long enough, knows that testosterone falls off a cliff after 40, along with your punch resistance, your reflexes, your stamina, your strength. And it only drops off faster if you're inactive and smoking weed and taking mushrooms like Mike Tyson has been. Now, Jake Paul is an average fighter, but he's been training like a Trojan for the last 5 years. He's 6'1", he's 227 pounds, and he's heavy-handed. Mike hasn't had a professional fight in 20 years. And there comes a point where the gulf in skill is more than offset by youth, and we saw that yesterday. Mike was absolutely shot to pieces. After 2 rounds, he couldn't even move anymore. Jake, out of sympathy, just stopped punching and just carried him for 8 rounds. It was a sad sight, and I wasn't watching it because I was expecting a quality tear-up. I was watching because millions and millions of pounds of mug money was going through the market. Liquidity that I have not even seen in blockbuster world title fights. So Jake Paul was a favorite at about 1.6 to win. Now, whilst I had him as a favorite to win, I had no idea how to price up this fight. There were just so many unknowns. And when you're hearing Mike Tyson fans go on, now I got to admit, it does get hard to stick to your guns. And that's why it's so important to tune out the noise and just trust your methodology. If you need others' approval as confirmation, then you're going to be a net loser in the long run. You know, I've watched boxing long enough. I've seen many legendary fighters fight way longer than they should have and lose against opposition that they never would have. And one thing you can always rely on is for casual fans to look at the past with rose-tinted glasses, or to bet on the person that they want to win. The reason for that is because casuals can't separate head from heart. Tyson has a cult-like following, and nothing would have satisfied the millions that tuned in more than watching the boxing legend iron out the brash, loud-mouthed, self-proclaimed problem child. If betting on Mike Tyson to win was a vote for what you wanted to happen, then great. It would have made the victory all the more sweet. But the Gen Z money is flowing into unknown territory that's home for shrewd value spotters. So I welcome this new influencer boxing phenomenon. It's inviting a new wave of casual punters to the sport who have no regard for value, and whilst opportunities will be scarce, they will be extremely valuable if you know how to spot them. Look, even I was hesitant to back Jake Paul from the beginning, but after 2 rounds, when it was clear that Mike was gassed out, I hammered that 1.5 price that was on offer for Jake. Pre-match in my betting preview, through a process of elimination, I was able to identify value in laying Mike Tyson to win by KO in the method of victory market at around 4.9. for reasons I already mentioned regarding his health and inactivity. Another similar fight which served as a reference point was when Vitor Belfort fought Evander Holyfield a couple of years ago. Now, Vitor Belfort has never laced up boxing gloves professionally. He's an MMA fighter, and he dished out a vicious beating on one of the greatest heavyweights ever. And it wasn't just sad, it was embarrassing. Now, bear in mind, Holyfield is a 58-year-old just like Tyson, only he still trains every day, so he's fit. So I figured the only real shout that Tyson would have would be to press for the early KO, and that's why I advised a back to lay on Mike in the early rounds, which landed. So no matter what sport I'm trading, every time I look at the odds, I'm constantly using reference points in the past to gauge whether or not what's currently being offered is of any value. When you've traded long enough, there's always similar situations and scenarios which you can draw upon. And if you feel like the odds are out of line with what's currently being offered, then it makes for a valuable trade. Markets are not efficient. Similar situations aren't always priced up the same way because the odds are only driven by statistics to an extent. They're also exacerbated by market sentiment for the better or worse. So as I said with racing, I've seen enough races to know how a certain horse should behave at a certain segment of the track. And based on what I see, if I feel like the horse's chance of winning is greater than what the odds are on offer, then that will set up a value-based back bet. In cricket, if a team is chasing a score that's never been chased before, but conditions are favourable, there's dew, or they're a great batting lineup against a weaker bowling unit, then I'll look for an angle to back the chasing team. And in boxing, I've seen so many great fighters lose to opposition that they should never have lost to because they carried on their careers too long. I've also seen the long reigning senior champion school the young and up and coming challenger whose resume or fighting style is of little substance, but he's got great marketing and hype behind him. Determining value is just a combination of combining quantitative with qualitative data, and that takes experience. Looking at the past, looking at numbers and looking at data it isn't necessarily wrong, but things that haven't happened before happen all the time. And past data just can't account for that. Like the fight we were just talking about with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. If we're going just by data, we're looking at who's fought who. We're comparing resumes. I mean, you'd be crazy to go against Mike, right? It's obviously nonsense, but believe it or not, that's what a lot of people were doing. So data has to be considered within the context of which it was gathered and weighted accordingly. And to what extent one strikes this balance is very individualistic. And this is what makes a market. Everybody's willing to take on a different price because we all have a different idea about what's value. So if you want to be a long-term profitable investor, trader, or better, value should be the most important consideration, because when you understand it, you're able to tune out the noise and just focus on what's true, or you're at least able to connect the dots. And then you'll come to realize that it's not just about being right more often than you're wrong, but it's about being right at the right price. So hopefully I've given you some sort of idea as to how I go about looking for value. And hopefully that's cleared up things in that regard. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.